Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blogging Theology. Why are so many British people converting to Islam, especially recently? Well, today I'm delighted to be joined by Imam Ashraf Dabous. You're most welcome, sir. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khair for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on, sir. Um,
Barakallah.
Imam Ashraf is an imam at Lewisham Mosque here in London, and he studied at the Islamic University of Medina, and he studied also privately under various scholars studying Hanbali and Hanafi fiqh and other sciences. And he recently graduated from Goldsmith University with an MSc in CBT therapy and is a qualified counselor. And he's kindly agreed to discuss why apparently so many British people, especially youngsters, as I say, are turning to Islam. And I noticed this myself during Ramadan when I remember seeing social media reports almost every day of people becoming Muslim, huge numbers. And so can you tell us a bit about this extraordinary spike in conversions?
Bismillah wa salatu salam ala rasulillah. So I can give you my personal experience from Lewisham and from parts of East London as well, because I frequent some of the masajid in East London, and through connections to other imams, also hearing about the new Muslims and the uptake in Islam. And so I would say that it actually started prior to Ramadan.
Right.
So we've been seeing an uptake in the amount of new Muslims for the last maybe year or so, and gradually increasing. And just before Ramadan, there was like a big kind of boom, and the numbers dramatically went up. So we had roughly a week or two before Ramadan, we had 11 new Muslims in one day in Lewisham. During Ramadan, 7. Sometimes, you would be in the masjid and someone would come after Asr and say, I would like to take Shahada. Sometimes two people at the same time. Then after Maghrib, then after Isha. So after every prayer, sometimes after Dhuhr, after Jum'ah, we had quite frequently after Jum'ah, we had young and old, the mostly young, but even those who were to be considered old, likewise entering into Islam, sometimes attending lessons. So in a masjid that I give a lesson in East London, there was a young man who was attending the lessons weekly, and I had assumed that this young man is Muslim, and so I was speaking that evening about calling other people to Islam, and I remember being quite blunt and saying, if you love someone and you care for someone, then you should call them to that which is good for them. If you saw your friend running towards something harmful, you would stop them and shout out. And quite I said, like, put it on your friends and ask them, why don't you become a Muslim? What's stopping you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so this young man came after the lesson and said, I want to become a Muslim today. And so I was taken back. I said, you've been attending for the last few weeks, I assumed you're a Muslim. And he said, no, I've been interested, and so I've been coming. Likewise, at that same mosque in East London, a young man came all the way from Wembley to take his shahada to become a Muslim, and he's been attending every week. So there is a clear rise. Definitely, we see it, and not only is there a clear rise, but I think there's a rise in those who are accepting Islam, but also the level of Islam that they adopt. Immediately they start to pray, fasting, um, changing the way that they kind of like dress and so on and so forth. And of course, not that the dress code is really too relevant to practicing Islam per se, but it shows there's that desire and that want to really take the deen on full steam ahead.
But I'm going to ask about the demographics of this. Are we talking overwhelmingly about young people? And if so, quite what age range are we talking about?
So um, I would say between like the average age between 15 to 40,
Wow.
and the majority of them between 15 and late 20s.
Right.
But then we've had some that are even younger. So we had an 8-year-old girl. She actually became a Muslim. Her
Wow.
father came with her, and she was, very intelligent. You would assume 8 years old, how can they make a decision like that? But
Mm.
she really surprised me when I spoke to her. She became Muslim, and she was pushing her father. She wanted to
Mm.
do it herself.
Wow.
We've had those that are in their 70s taking their shahada. So the average age, I'd say, between 15 and 40. But
Mm.
then you have those that are above 40 and those that are under 15 years old.
And the gender ratio, what would that be, do you think?
So the gender, it's very interesting because most people assume that it's the majority of those that are becoming Muslim are young men, but
Mm.
that's only because the young men are the ones that are recorded, as we can present them to the community at the front. But we
Mm.
actually have a lot of young sisters, and some very, very interesting stories. And you see it different ethnicities. We've seen here Polish, Italian, Indian, Sri Lankan.
Mm.
Various European countries, English, of course, if I didn't already say that,
Mm.
Caribbean. So a wide range of ethnicities, men and women. And the women, I would say, probably in the same amount as the men. Although during Ramadan, I believe the men there were more men taking Islam up than women, it seems.
Mm. Mm. Now, is this something to do perhaps with the influence of people like Andrew Tate upon many young men
Mm.
coming to Islam, and other very famous sports figures, footballers and so on? Do you think that is playing a significant role in attracting men, particularly younger men, to Islam?
So I think it's difficult to assess at face value,
Mm.
because unless you ask them, like, how much do you actually use the internet, how influential is it to you, and
Mm.
um,
Mm.
but I do believe there is a role that individuals like Andrew Tate and sports personalities are playing. So,
Mm.
for example, we've had young children come to the masjid as a part of school visits. So we have school visits where year ones, year twos, all the way up to year sixes, they come to the masjid. We do a presentation for them.
Yeah.
We, teach them about the five pillars of Islam, show them what a prayer mat looks like, what does it look like to kind of pray, the minbar, things like that.
Mm.
And they recognize the sujood because of Mohamed Salah, the famous football player.
Mm.
So
Mm.
non-Muslim young children, they recognize immediately that's what Mohamed Salah does, and they know he's a Muslim.
Right.
Um, Likewise, I would suggest perhaps individuals like Khabib, Sadio Mane, for example, very well known for his charity publicly. I think these individuals are having a big impact.
Mm.
Andrew Tate, I believe that his role is perhaps slightly different, because I think that there are many young men in society today, and just through interacting with young men, there are many young men that feel society has perhaps maligned them slightly. They don't
Mm.
really have a place in society,
Mm.
and so individuals like Andrew Tate, they've come in and they've kind of filled that void for some. Whether you agree with his views or you don't, it's a
Mm.
matter of fact. Um, and I had a very interesting discussion with a young brother recently, and
Mm.
I don't think he would mind sharing what he said to me. And it made me actually really make me think. He said, with some respect to the, he called them the clergymen of Islam. He said, it's very difficult to take them as role models for a young man, because you see them arguing and bickering and backbiting online,
Uh,
and he attributed that to female behavior. His words, he said, like women. Those were his words.
yeah.
And you see that they're not keeping in shape. Many of them, they don't look like they're in shape, that, they don't really represent what I want to be as a young man. And
Right.
then when you look to individuals like, Andrew Tate,
Mm.
they're all about, like external masculinity, physique, acting like a man, and so on and so forth. And so, um, that this topic here, the topic of what Andrew Tate represents, I think it's a big kind of topic, and it would be wrong to say or to suggest that he hasn't had an impact. And
Mm.
and even him becoming Muslim, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant him guidance and steadfastness. And
Mm.
I think it's important that people realize that it's going to take him time to internalize Islam, and
Yeah.
we can disagree with his views, we can disagree with his actions, but
Mm.
we also have to give him the benefit of the doubt, and kind of realize he's on a journey at the same
Yeah.
time.
I think in a society in the West now, and throughout the West, really, where traditional masculinity is rubbished and even seen as wrong,
Yeah,
extraordinary, really. Um,
yeah,
but human nature doesn't go away. Human nature, contrary to, in my view, what the West believes, is kind of like a blank slate, and we can just create people through, engineering and through education and so on. But actually, there are such things as men and women.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
made differently by God Himself.
yeah,
And people like Tate, whether or not they always express themselves in a way that we feel comfortable with, at least are going against that trend and asserting
yeah,
a kind of masculinity. As I say, whether or not it's always helpful is another question, but nevertheless, they are
yeah,
doing that. And I can see why that might appeal.
yeah. And I think the fact that he is kind of championing masculinity,
Mm,
people are jumping on to the bandwagon, because there's a
mm,
lot of young men, they really do feel disenfranchised.
yeah,
They, I mean, even if you look at it from the mental health perspective, the mental health industry is you could say pretty much female led.
yeah,
I know many Muslim organizations, they're struggling to find male therapists, and
sure.
men don't really want to speak to female therapists. And I know of female, clientele, if I should call them that, but help seekers, I guess, and they're seeking male therapists, because the type of therapy they receive from a man is different to that which they
Yeah,
would receive from a woman,
yeah,
and so for young men, it is problematic, and we're seeing this even spill into marriages. We're seeing it spill into marriages now, where it's like society to some degree has castrated what it means to be a man, but then small communities, traditional communities, will complain about the men not being men. But if society is going to take what it is to be a man away from them, and is going to remove the arenas of masculinity for them to kind of develop that masculinity,
mm.
we can only blame ourselves later on down the line.
And I don't mean to criticize other religions. It's very easy to do, but I'm thinking of the Christian
Yeah,
churches, particularly, for example, the Church of England. I used to be a Christian, so I had some personal experience of this. Often scratching their heads, thinking, "Why are no young men coming to our churches?" And think,
yeah,
"Well, we need to develop new evangelistic tools and new outreach programs to attract young men." And I'm thinking, because they haven't got a
yeah,
clue. They haven't got a clue what the problem is. But the problem is the Church of England is not just the Church of England. I'm not picking on this one place, but they are
yeah,
the national church of this country. Is, many would argue, and I don't necessarily disagree, heavily
mm,
feminized. But it's run by men overwhelmingly, but it's still a very feminized church where the emphasis is on caring and sharing and
yeah,
feminine and communicate, all these kind of very feminine
yeah,
interpersonal kind.
yeah,
There's nothing wrong with those values, of course, but there's much more to human experience than that. And men, particularly, who are looking for other kinds of role models, are not modeled at all in the Church of England, I think. And you see that to some extent even in the Catholic Church in the West, even though it's completely male dominated,
yeah,
it's very kind of feminine in its kind of attitudes and the way it expresses itself, and completely against any kind of principle. No, this is wrong, and
yeah,
and
yeah.
any
Directives.
or a sense of discipline. The
Yeah,
discipline is a bad word. I don't remember the last time I heard the Church of England talking about the discipline of Christian faith, where things, there's right and there's wrong and there's clarity. It's just absent from the discourse,
yeah,
and the same, I would argue, in many facets of the Catholic Church as well. Contrast all that with Islam, and
yeah. Alhamdulillah.
all of this is there and in abundance, even though there's no clergy. You mentioned clergy, but there's actually no clergy in Islam. There's no
Yeah.
high,
So yeah, yeah,
there's no pope, there's no magisterium, and
yeah, yeah,
yet the Muslims, men and women, live a disciplined life. They say they have clear boundaries. They know this
hmm,
is haram and this is halal. That's, in my experience, almost completely missing from Christianity as such, and that's a
yeah,
remarkable contrast, I think.
yeah. And it sounds like you've also just described the mental health arena as well, because that's pretty much what the mental health arena has become, where it's
Mm,
all about kind of providing that space for a person to feel comfortable, safe, kind of justify, and many people, they're actually looking for directives, they're looking for direction, they're looking for principles, and they don't find it in the mental health sector. So they're kind of lost. And it's very interesting you mentioned discipline, because it's been a key word amongst many of the young Muslims, a key word many of them have mentioned, and you'll probably see it in some of the Shahada videos. They say discipline
So
when asked, what is
what
it?
do they? I know what I mean by that, but what do they say they mean by what disciplined? Is it the lifestyle? Is it what is it they see that they find attractive?
Yeah, so it's the lifestyle,
Right.
the fact that things are very clear, the fact that young men, their friends are not drinking, are not, engaging in promiscuity, they're not smoking. Although there are many young Muslims that do those things, but there are many that aren't. Even if they're mixing with those that are doing those things, they're still abstaining, even to a degree.
And even those, by the way, who are drinking, those Muslims drinking alcohol is one example.
Yeah,
They know it's wrong.
exactly.
I can't think any of them would say, "Oh yeah, drinking's fine," because they know what the Quran says. No, no to
Yeah,
intoxicants.
100%.
Whereas the Christian equivalent would be, well, actually, yeah, they would then seek to justify it because,
Yeah.
oh well, that was the Bible, that was then, but now we live in 2023 in England or something, whatever the argument may be. Yeah.
Yeah, we've even had individuals highlight the fact that they've
Mm.
seen the Christian faith changing within the last 2 decades, where things were previously considered to be wrong and now they're considered to be okay.
Exactly.
New narratives being pushed based upon the idea of the day, and so as I mentioned previously, a lady actually brought her daughter to the masjid, and she wanted her daughter to become Muslim. So not
How
a
old?
young man.
Really?
Uh,
So
I-
how old was he?
yeah,
And so this is a non-Muslim parent bringing her child to the mosque
yeah,
and wanting the child to become a Muslim. Wow.
yeah, and I believe she was between the age of 11 to 15. I can't
Mm,
remember the exact age precisely,
mm,
but the reason that she mentioned was because things are clear cut. Like a man is a man and a woman is a woman,
right.
and she wanted her daughter to have direction and clear cut guidelines and a
Mm,
framework that she could apply into her own life, and that's a woman. And I've seen many young women, actually, when you speak to them, they do like the fact that Islam is clear.
mm,
That a man is a man, a woman is a woman, traditional roles, halal, haram, all of these things. People, I
mm,
think, especially um, for us as humans, we forget that we are purpose-driven creatures. We
mm,
we have to have a purpose which is clearly defined for us.
mm,
And many philosophers of old, they mention, a man without purpose is non-existent. And so you see that in today's society. You see what's happening because society has stripped itself of God, and in doing so, stripped itself of purpose. And
mm,
so man has been left to his own, whims and desires, and is simply drowning in that kind of, I
mm.
don't know what you want to call it, cauldron, I guess.
Mm, mm. And I think in previous generations, even before my time, what was often attractive to many people was a kind of political agenda, political program to
Yeah.
transform the world, whether it be Marxist socialism or communism and so on. But I get the feeling that people aren't really attracted to that either, because they sense that it's all about increasing material standards of living, increasing
Mm,
our preoccupation with the physical world, but it doesn't offer what some Christians used to call, God-shaped hole in our heart. There's this sense
yeah,
that
yeah,
the core of our being is something that's not just meant for the dunya, but it has a transcendent purpose. And you talked about a purpose-driven life, but it's not just about having a Marxist vision for social justice. It's much more than that. It goes much deeper about what it means to be human, or man or woman. About prayer, about personal
yeah,
discipline, and these
yeah.
ideologies don't offer any of that, of course.
No, and it's been highlighted by some who I was speaking with Imam Shakil just the other day, the head Imam here, and we were noting that as far as I can remember, so in the last nearly 6 years now of being here, I can't remember anyone coming to Islam here at Lewisham due to the kind of like theological framework of Islam, where they've read you know um, tenets of Islam, the theological kind of framework, and that's what's convinced them. It's always been something of a more spiritual kind of whether it's they're touched by what they see, or they're searching, they're looking for Allah, for God, and at the time they didn't know what they were looking for. It's always been something more um, internal, as you mentioned, something related to purpose, something that feels like it fits. Whereas
Mm.
and the theology then comes later, and
Yeah.
so I think it's an important point that you mentioned, the God-shaped hole in the heart.
Mm.
and
Mm.
and I also believe that we have reached a point in society, in the West and generally in the world, not only in the West, where we've had what the dunya has to offer.
Mm. Mm.
There isn't much more, and
Yeah.
it's got to a point now where, in order for you to take any more from the dunya, you have to start to pervert things.
Mm.
We've taken so much of what the dunya has to offer that now we're looking for perversion, perversions of those things,
Mm.
to find that extra stimulation. And
Mm.
so people are seeing this and realizing that there must be more to life.
Mm.
I've
Mm.
been, I've been fulfilling my desires for the last how many years. I'm seeing people doing it, but yet I don't feel that contentment. I don't feel that fulfillment, and so they're looking for something else. And I believe the only community that really stands for anything anymore in the West is the Muslim community.
Mm.
They're,
But I,
they're the only ones that.
sorry, yeah, no,
Yeah, no, okay.
no, I was just saying, often, again, I don't mean to bash Christianity, but often the language is there. So, we're all Christians together, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. That's an
Yeah,
expression quite common. And even say during the Catholic Mass, you give the sign of peace. So you turn to your complete stranger next to you and say, peace be with you, basically. That's
mm,
Islamicum, actually, but not in Arabic. But the point is that you do that mechanically because it's part of the liturgy. Then you turn back again, and then after the service you leave and you never see this person again, and that's it. And contrast that with brotherhood or sisterhood in Islam. I don't think it's a mere word there. The sense of
no,
brotherhood, genuine. I mean, I've experienced it so many times. Wherever I go, I meet Muslims, and we talk. There is a real sense of connection simply by
yeah,
virtue of the fact we're Muslims, and I would never experience that in a Christian context. And maybe our society, our atomized, divided society, in lacking that sense of brotherhood that crosses over racial, class, social, economic
yeah.
barriers, hierarchies, it is an extraordinary phenomenon, I think.
Yeah, and I also think that the modern issue of identity politics maybe has a link to this, lack of brotherhood. Because although, of course, I'm sure you would have more kind of reading into it, but Europe previously being a Christian kind of nation, the place of Christianity, that there would have been that affiliation to the faith. That was the main kind of identity, Christian and European. Likewise, for those that came from Africa, from the Middle East, from the Southeast Asian continent,
Mm,
it's Islam, and then the place, the region. But now that you've separated God from society, you've separated that integral part of identity. People are looking for that brotherhood in other areas, or they're looking for that affiliation in other areas. And so some are finding it in gender, others are finding it in color or race.
mm,
Others are finding it in political affiliation or inclination. And whereas for Islam, it's the Islam that comes first, the brotherhood that comes first. And it's
mm,
something I don't believe can be quite understood until you've experienced it. To
mm,
touch down anywhere in the world and find a local mosque and find your brothers, it's
yeah.
it's it's an experience that perhaps the word brotherhood doesn't really encapsulate.
And also, you mentioned that. I mean, slightly off topic, but you're right. If I go to any mosque in the world, I will know what will happen during Juma, for example, or during the 5 daily prayers. There's going to be a set prayers in the same language. They're not going to be
Yeah.
usually at all in any other language than Arabic, and so on. But if I go to any Christian church in the world, I really won't know what's going to happen
Mm,
next. Whether there's going to be a priest in a dog collar, speaking Latin, or a woman with a guitar singing songs or whatever.
yeah.
You just have no idea what you're going to see, and also what the leaders of the church will believe, because they could believe
Mm,
anything. Whereas in terms of Sunni Islam, there's an impressive uniformity, I think, of
Yeah.
practice, which goes right back to the Prophet, and that's not
Yeah.
historically contested at all. But also in terms of belief, we know what you're going to believe in Tawhid, they're going to believe in the books revealed by God, the six
Yeah.
elements of faith, the angels,
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah.
And that's just not contested. I mean, no one's sitting
Mm.
around saying, well, are there really angels? As many Christians will do. Just myth. No, nope, you believe it. The Quran says
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
End
Yeah.
of story. And so there's impressive sort of predictability and stability
Mm.
in Islamic practice globally, as you say.
So are you saying that perhaps that predictability is a key part of why people are coming to Islam?
Yes, because what I meant was you mentioned that many people have observed that the Christian churches, for example, have changed their beliefs
Changed.
in
Yeah.
recent decades over, say, what's called gay marriage and other LGBT things.
Mm.
You never quite know what's gonna happen when you go into a particular
Mm.
church, even in the same
Yeah.
denomination. You're not going to know, say in the Church of England.
Yeah.
Whereas that uniformity of belief and practice is a sense of what you're dealing with, a religion that isn't going with the passing winds and fashions and changes of the world. And
Mm.
those who like faith, objective and
Mm.
unchanging, because obviously it's not created by human beings.
Yeah.
That's
By
a
God.
hallmark of truth, rather.
Mm.
Whereas I think many people would. I think I saw it like that.
I mean, so I guess it would be a good point for me to ask you the question about the cultural, because it's something that we often discuss as imams. So,
Yeah,
for example, here now, as I'm sure you've experienced and you've seen, there are cultural iterations of Islam
yeah,
that sometimes may not be perceived from the outside until you actually start to mingle with the community. But so, for example, you might have East African, Southeast Asian, Arab, West African, and everyone has a an element of flavor or color, if you like, to the deen. And so from your experience, did that have an impact on how easy or difficult it was for you to adopt Islam?
yeah. I think it was. I mean, my journey was much more kind of theological, and having
Okay.
been a committed Christian. So, um, but yes, you're right. I was keenly aware of crossing over a civilizational divide from the majoritarian
Mm,
white Christian English community, of which I was obviously a member, to a minority community, which was
yeah.
multi-ethnic, multicultural. Um, and so there was that, and that meant encountering different, even things like different foods, nothing really to do
Yeah.
with Islamic doctrine, but different foods, different cultures. But one of the things that really was a world changer for me, going from a majority participation to a minority participation, is that the world is seen quite differently from a minority point of view. I don't
Oh,
mean the universe, I mean politically. So
yeah. Yeah.
looking comfortably as a European on the third world, and the Middle East and all that,
Mm,
those foreign places, becoming part of a community which has been on the receiving end of military occupation,
mm,
of
mm,
colonialism, of injustice and exploitation and racism, and identifying with that community now was a big change, a paradigm shift in the way I perceive the world. And suddenly, as you take the issue of the occupied territories where the Zionists are occupying Palestine,
yeah.
before it was Israel, yeah, the Jews deserve a homeland, Holocaust, terrible things that happened to them. It was effortlessly fine that Israel
Yeah.
existed, everything else.
Yeah.
And because that's, if you read the Daily Telegraph or watch Fox News, that's all you're going to think anyway. But suddenly to understand a very different narrative from the other side, of peoples who have been occupied by foreigners themselves, often from Russia or Europe or America,
Yeah.
calling themselves Jews, but look indistinguishable from Europeans. I mean, they are
Yeah.
Europeans or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who
Very
come
true.
in and simply ethnically cleanse their villages, occupy their country, and create a system of apartheid, basically, which it is today.
Mm,
Um, that takes a completely different perspective. And for me, that was one of the biggest changes, rather than, oh, they're multicultural now, or they're, I'm, as a white person, I'm a minority within the Ummah.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't bother political, but that was there. But the bigger thing for me was how I perceived the geopolitics of the world and the asymmetry of power. Whereas before that, the white man was dominant, now he has seen it's problematic, and there's a
Mm,
history and issues, which I really didn't get before. And I think most people in the West don't get it because they're not able to or want to see things differently from the other side. If they were
mm.
to try and see things differently from the other side, so much, well, might be solved, but who knows? But yeah, so it was quite a big change in some ways.
But I mean, so you mentioned quite a few interesting points. So you said the white man, like so as in as I guess from a geopolitical perspective or political kind of identity, um, but so this is something that I've had a contention with at times
Mm,
with the Muslim community, where sometimes we attribute disbelief to a color. So for example, you might find certain Muslims, they will, especially online, when talking about Islam, they'll talk about Islam as if as if it's an ethnic group. So it would be like, the Muslims and the white man, or white Europeans don't like this, and Islam, of course, is not related to an ethnic group. And so I worry that that kind of it pushes the us versus them agenda, and sometimes we see it. So for example, we had someone come to the masjid, took shahada, and was sitting down and talking with someone, and this was a few years ago. Alhamdulillah, like we try, especially Imam Shakil tries his best to kind of educate the community, and the community are very much welcoming.
mm,
Generally speaking, they don't really raise an eyebrow now, regardless who comes into the masjid. But a young brother, after the man took his shahada, he mentioned, this man, he mentioned, oh, I play for a particular football team, and the brother said, oh yeah, those white boys. And so I felt, really kind of awkward, because it's even, even though the brother, he's not of he's of a mixed background, but
mm.
it kind of, it makes it seem like, Islam is not for, the white man, or Islam is not for, in certain communities, for example, if you go to certain parts of England, there's a perception that Islam is not for the black man. And we had someone, in fact, he became a Muslim a few years ago, and he mentioned one of the real reasons that I became Muslim is because I remember um, Lewisham's involvement in standing up for issues of oppression within the black community, and that, really kind of helped me to understand that Islam is not against black people, whereas within the community that he came from, there were kind of, sounds that, Islam doesn't like black people, Islam is only for the Arabs, things like this. And so sometimes it seems like from the inside we might be making it a bit more difficult for people to approach Islam because of the language that we might use,
Yeah.
sometimes our cultural practices or habits, for example.
Mm. No, I think that's right. I mean, I've learned, there's one thing I did learn is that racist stereotypes are possessed not just by white people of other
Yeah,
ethnic groups, but other ethnic groups sometimes have racial stereotypes, not just of white people, but other ethnic groups other than their
yeah,
own.
of course.
But
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
everywhere, actually. And this seems to be a common experience of humanity throughout history, actually. The more you
Mm,
look into it, the
mm.
more you realize how
Human
global
nature.
and it's human nature. Um, but so, yeah, absolutely. I've not, to my knowledge, experienced that directed to me. In fact, I think it's worked the other way around for me. But
Okay,
I,
alhamdulillah.
I understand there is. I mean, I've learned awkwardly this thing called white privilege is a reality, and
Mm,
well, but that hasn't been an issue preventing me embracing Islam, which is what you're talking about. Um, but yeah, racial prejudice stereotypes are ubiquitous, and yeah, I don't really feel qualified to comment it anymore about that. But I know that a lot of my um, uh, success in inverted commas
mm.
is partly due to being white. I'm told white privilege. Some people tell me that, but that's not for me to judge.
I mean, people are entitled to their opinions, and I would suggest, because I've seen some of the content that you've been producing, and I think more, the style of delivery, the topics, but again, that's going to be my opinion. But on the point, so for example, if we do look at the issue of white privilege, minority, issues,
Mm,
it makes me think about the working class, for example, working class English. Makes me think about Irish, and working class English people are white. Irish people are considered to be white, and
mm.
yet you see them suffering the same, financial struggles, the same kind of, educational struggles,
Yeah.
cultural issues.
No, but what I mean is, as a good friend of mine who, occasionally, he's an Arab, so he's a brown-skinned Egyptian. There's a reason I'm saying this, because it's
Yeah.
directly relevant to the point. And
Okay.
his experience, our experience of going through immigration, say in France,
Mm,
in Germany, Berlin,
mm.
or other countries, even in the Arab world, is very different.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
he has the same kind of passport that I do, or he has another passport, an Egyptian passport. But I know that so far, when I fly, when I go to say Berlin, passport control and immigration is really quick for me, like seconds. And when I went to San Francisco at the beginning of the year, the long queue of people. I thought, oh my God, they're going to ask me questions. And I knew what they would ask me, because I could hear the people in front being asked the questions. So there were three questions. I knew the answers, very straightforward. And they were being told, one person was taken away, one black woman was taken
Mm,
away by some guards. I think, oh God, now it's my turn to be interrogated. So the man looked
yeah.
at me, asked me three questions, and it was over in about 10 seconds. Whoosh, I was through. I thought,
Yeah.
good grief, it's happened again. This is
Mm, mm.
my normal. Now, my Arab friend, who looks perfectly respectable and perfectly normal, doesn't look like a terrorist, if there is such a thing, as looking
Yeah.
like a terrorist. I mean, uh, that's not his experience,
Mm, mm.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
No, I
usually
understand.
opposite. Sorry, and his experience is not unique; it's the norm. And this is something that he has told me about, and I've had to learn by observing the way we're treated, even though we're pretty much the same in terms of our
Mm,
backgrounds, and so on. And there's no baggage attached to either of us in terms of activities we've done. We shouldn't, we're both kind of pretty much on the same page. And he will be stopped and questioned, and I won't.
yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
that's what I mean by my own personal experience of white privilege. But that's not really to do with
Mm,
Islam. This is about Islam, really. But
yeah.
nevertheless,
Yeah.
that was my awakening, or one of my awakenings to this whole reality.
Mm. So the way like my point, I guess, linking it to the issue of Islam and da'wah, is that sometimes I guess when those kind of discussions spill into masajid, or spill into kind of like the arena of da'wah, it can kind of create a block between the masses and Islam.
Mm,
and um and I guess that's probably the conundrum of our times, where especially online, where everyone's kind of speaking from their places in society, whether they're in a political field, a grassroots field, an academic field, and these kind of views and experiences, they clash without the relevant context. And so on the ground, I believe it can cause problems,
yeah.
and sometimes it's very easy for those that are on the ground to adopt certain narratives without kind of thinking about the impact it can have on the masses. If someone walks into a masjid and he hears, let's say an English person walks into the masjid and he wants to know about Islam, and he hears someone using that type of terminology,
Mm,
associating disbelief to the white man or the European man, it can have a negative impact. And if you look, the Prophet ﷺ, you look to the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was no animosity or enmity between those that became Muslim due to the past that they came from. And I think, just listening to you talk about how your worldview changed, it
mm.
reminded me of the ayah, Sibghatullah wa man ahsanu min Allahi sibgha, that the tanning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and who is better than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in tanning. um, how your world view completely changed, and
Mm.
now you associate yourself to the Muslims,
But what was
and
interesting, I can still relate that. I can still, in my mind, if I was to, read, if I watch Fox News or Telegraph, I can
yeah.
still connect with how they see the world. It's not like a completely alien thing I've never heard of before. I
Of
can still
course, yeah,
get into it, but
yeah.
because I know the other alternative reality, I'm not persuaded by, or I'm not I don't just accept it uncritically.
Mm.
Um, so it's like being bilingual or something. I can speak both
Yeah,
languages,
yeah.
but I know if one's concerned with truth and justice and right and wrong, then it becomes easier to make a decision. And so much of the debate in the West is ignorant of the alternative perspective and just
Mm.
demonizes, sees it as a problem. Because we are superior, although we never say it publicly. Well, sometimes we do, but we shouldn't, from that point of view. But the assumption is there. Boy, is it there. And it's big time in France,
Mm.
where I also spend some time. The effortless superiority of the French when it comes to their civilization, their law, their state, their political philosophy is total on the left and the right. And
Mm.
that negatively judging Muslims, of whom there are more in France than any other European country. So goodness knows how one becomes a Muslim in France from a white French perspective, because you really are crossing over lots of red lines you shouldn't cross over
Mm.
there,
Mm.
so to speak. So I think it's a less of a problem in England than it is, say, in places like France or Germany, which is almost as bad as, if not as bad as France, in my experience.
Mm.
England is better, believe it or not, than some places.
Yeah, no, we've had French Muslims come to and they've lived in South London, and
Yeah.
they've mentioned they some are shocked when they see the level of Islam being practiced in the UK when they come over from France. But so are you saying then that for the European, English, French, German, that the color comes before faith, I guess political inclination, because
Yeah, it is. There's a racial element in, say, France, but there's also a very heavily ideological component that the right way to live, the only way to live, is according to certain secular understandings, not just of the state but also of man and woman, men and women. This is a really important issue, actually, for France, particularly.
yeah,
Men and women are absolutely equal, and by equal, they don't mean a Muslim might agree with that spiritually. They might say, "We'll have equal access to God, God's grace, and we're both, we both pray." But they mean the same. And
yeah,
any
yeah,
talk of any difference in roles, for example, between men and women, is akin to a serious thought crime. I mean, it really is, and the state will come in. I mean, there have been imams in France who've been removed and deported
yeah,
for quoting from the Quran. I mean, this is not hyperbole. These are well-known instances in the last year. Now, nothing like that, I don't think, happens in England yet. But that's very extremist secularism,
yeah,
which insists that Muslims believe the same thing. Otherwise, you will suffer the consequences. And so, how you, as a white Christian Frenchman, for example,
mm,
wanting to embrace Islam, I mean, it's difficult because not only, I mean, what is Islam in that context? Are you being told the
yeah,
full story anyway, or are you being told a sanitized French Islam which has been gutted of anything distinctive that is different from secularism? Uh,
mm,
whereas those things in England, we have problems with, we're told we must accept LGBT on pain of punishment, but in France, it's that for sure as well, plus a whole lot of other things as well.
mm. So how do you see then Islam being like, for those that are on the ground in masajid? How do you view the best way to take Islam to the masses? What
I think
mediums?
it's happening, isn't it? Through the media, it's happening through. We bypass, people bypass rather the official media. They bypass what the state says. They bypass, what the BBC or say, and
Yeah,
they go to YouTube. They go to Instagram. They go to TikTok. That they listen to, the usual list of people like Hamza Zoltzis and others. They turn to trusted guides who are not echoing, who are not paid by the state,
yeah,
who are not attempting at all to just tell you to believe in secular liberalism. In fact, they see
mm,
secularism as a problem, as it is a problem.
yeah,
Um, so there are now, because of technology, there are alternative ways to learn about Islam. There are lots of ways to learn about Islam now, I think. I mean,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
abundance of places to learn. So I think things are really good in that sense. We're not relying on the state to tell us about Islam. We can
mm,
rely on whomever we want. You
yeah.
know,
And I think also the communities are playing a big part in that as well. The new generation. I think that's one of the reasons for the current kind of uptake in Islam amongst those that are of a younger age, because you have I can't speak, of course, for France, but in the UK, for example, young Muslims that are, they see themselves as British, proud of Islam. They don't really see a clash between the two, and so they're demanding, prayer spaces at work, prayer spaces in universities, prayer spaces in colleges. They're praying in parks, in schools,
Yeah.
and so the masses are actually seeing what Islam is through the people on the ground, which kind of rids them of the narratives that maybe they've been fed through the media by
Well, this is it.
politicians.
But it's also not just, yeah, I agree. It's not just the media's narrative that we it's also that when you have a lot of immigrants from the Arab world, say in the 1950s or 60s, or from
Yeah,
Pakistan, from Bangladesh, whose first language wasn't English, and they were clearly foreign to England.
yeah,
But now they've had children, and their children have had children. And this generation you're referencing there are indigenous British Muslims who have
yeah,
absolutely no reason to think they're anything other than that. And
yeah,
so they are part of the community now,
yeah,
unlike their grandparents who were clearly immigrants and trying to establish themselves in the country which was not of their own birth or making.
mm,
Now
mm,
we have Muslims who are grassroots up part of England or Scotland or Wales, as much as anyone else. And there are neighbours, there are friends, there are schoolmates, and so all these barriers have broken down completely
yeah,
now because of this most recent generational shift. So
yeah.
Islam is now becoming British now.
Yeah, and I think that's it highlights the importance of the masajid.
Mm,
The masajid investing in perhaps imams, staff members, coordinators that have the ability to bring the culture of calling people to Islam and practicing your
yeah.
religion, in your life, in all aspects of your life,
Mm.
because the masajid now, the amount of masajid in the UK,
Oh,
we can have a massive impact on the ground just by practicing Islam. There was a young brother in East London. He was on the news recently because he saved an elderly Englishman from a fire. His block went up in flames, and he ran in, pulled the elderly man out. And on the interview, you can see it online. He's saying, this is what Islam teaches us. This is what our religion teaches us. And so, that act is perhaps more powerful than even the YouTube videos and the lectures, because people are seeing firsthand,
yeah.
what Islam actually is through those that are living amongst them.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. These incredible acts of courage and charity and kindness, simple neighborly kindness, makes all the difference, because people are less impressed with ideas, more impressed with actions. And Islam
Yeah,
is all about actions. I mean, obviously there are core beliefs, but it's
yeah,
largely to do with behavior. It's to do with how we treat people and how we bring goodness and justice to the world. And
yeah, yeah,
everyone, atheists are impressed with that. I would contend everyone's impressed with that.
yeah, 100%.
Mm. I was just saying, I was speaking to a friend of mine earlier today, Dr.
Mm,
Abdullah Swedi, who
mm.
actually um, teaches at the Islamic University of Medina. He's
Okay,
a
mashallah.
he is Swedish. No, he's a white Swedish guy. So I'm trying to say
Okay.
a convert to Islam. And I was asking him about, because I wanted to see if the phenomena that you've been speaking about,
Mm,
this upsurge in people embracing Islam, is just an English phenomena, or is it more global than that? And I
mm,
got permission from him to quote exactly what he said to me. It was on WhatsApp. He said, "People are," and he's talking about Sweden here in Europe. "People are taking shahadas all over, all of the time. I have never seen anything like it." He said, "I have
subhanallah.
never seen anything like it." And this
Subhanallah.
man knows Sweden really well.
Mm,
In terms of, he's an academic who takes a very great interest in the social political scene in Sweden. Um, so it's happening in Sweden. It's
mm,
happening in the United Kingdom. Um, Something's happening. I can't speak to what's happening in Italy or Spain. I have no idea. But it looks like it is a international phenomenon, not just
yeah.
local to England. What do you think? What's your sense?
I mean, just from those that are becoming Muslim in Lewisham, it seems to be international, because we have members of so we've had Italians, we've had Polish, we've had French, and they're taking. We've had Portuguese, and they're taking their Shahada here. Some of them they live here. Some of them they might be back and forth.
Mm,
Um, you know, I definitely believe that it's you know, an international uptake. I mean, South America, for example, it's been
Oh,
a hotbed of Islam for the last decade or so.
mm.
Well documented. I think there have been some documentaries. Al Jazeera, I think maybe Vice News. I'm not sure if they're still in business. I heard there's some issues with them, but um, I really do believe. And studying in Medina, whilst I was studying in Medina, so we had, you know, students coming from all over the world. You
Mm.
know, a large amount of reverts from South America, from all over Europe. Some countries, 20 students a year being accepted from places like Italy. You know, North America, I guess it's well documented anyway. You know, Canada, Spain, Portugal, Germany, France, Sweden, Denmark, globally. You know,
Yeah.
it seems that Islam is really on the rise um, in large numbers.
Yeah, I was thinking of Turkey. We've had the first round of the presidential elections, parliamentary elections recently, and contrary to all expectations, the President Erdogan actually, well, I say won. I mean, he got the largest percentage of the votes. This is a
Yeah.
second round shortly. But the point about mentioning this is that he's been in power for like years and years, and he's known for being quite pro Islam. And I know this is a really controversial issue. I'm going to get lots of negative comments about this,
Mm.
but nevertheless, in Istanbul, where I've
Yeah.
been a couple of times the last year, you know, Muslims that I've met like him because not because he's a perfect human being, but because, you know, he opened Hagia Sophia, which was a museum under the under someone else, but it's now been turned back into a mosque.
Mm.
Uh, and a hugely popular mosque. I mean, people love it. I mean, you know, they love
Yeah.
to pray in it. It's packed full of people. And, you know, but now they have their chance to throw out this guy and have a nice, secular, democratic, pro-Western, pro-American, pro-EU
Mm.
president.
Yeah.
And all the media, of course, were routing for this pro-EU, pro-Western guy whose name I can't remember. Couldn't pronounce it when I could. I can't
Yeah.
pronounce
It's very difficult.
it. But what happened? He didn't win, and
Mm.
so you know the openly Muslim candidate who on the what was it the night of the election himself, he went to Hagia Sophia,
Yeah.
and the other
Subhanallah.
guy went to some memorial to Ataturk and
Mm.
paid his respects there. The
Mm.
optics there really spoke to what's going on there of an
Yeah.
Islamic kind of, I wouldn't call it revival, but a regaining of confidence and pride and identification Islamically in that
Yeah.
most secular of republics.
Yeah.
Turkey, which was basing its model on France of all things.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
crazy. So even there, we are seeing, it seems, a trajectory towards embracing Islamic identity and practice.
Yeah.
To even like this politician has been in power 20 years, getting him back in, keeping him in. I mean, when they
Mm.
got the alternative, a fresh new secular Western guy, nah, we'll keep the Muslim.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and we saw it in Algeria previously. You know,
Mm,
in Tunisia, they were calling for Islam. They wanted Islam. In Egypt, you know, they were calling for Islam. They wanted Islam. It's something that we see, you know, happening over and over again. When the people have the
yeah,
opportunity to make a choice, they choose Islam. And I think it's a very interesting point because we're
mm,
focusing on new Muslims, of course, but
mm,
I've also seen amongst young Muslims. So, you know, those that are born into Islam and born into Muslim families, you can ask, you know, those that are generally involved in teaching the Quran, the amount of huffaz in the UK now, it's unbelievable. You know, we have now young men and women who are memorizing the Quran, and the recitation is perhaps better than those who are going abroad to study.
really?
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preparing the
Wow.
ummah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, is really taking care of the future of Islam and the Muslims. And not only that, but it seems like the younger generation, they have more of a passion for practicing Islam than perhaps those that came before them
Yes.
in the UK.
Yes,
And 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 it,
when I was in Birmingham recently, I was speaking to several generations. They said the youngest of Muslims today are much more practicing committed than their parents, who are much more committed than their parents, but presumably the
yeah,
first generation who came here. So
yeah,
contrary to the opposite is happening in Christianity, where my grandparents were quite practicing, and then my parents not really, and now I well, you're 15, 20-year-old not practicing at all. It's the
Yeah,
opposite. So it's
exactly.
extraordinary tendency there. Extraordinary.
Yeah, so you have the new Muslims coming in. You have like within the political kind of arenas, you have Islam. I mean, I heard that the uh, Erdogan's opposition had even promised to enshrine the hijab into
Yes.
the
Yes.
constitution
I
to
heard that.
kind of, yeah,
Mm,
to try and
mm.
win over some of the
In
the support.
Turkey, I mean, this idea is almost, it is unthinkable. This is such an extraordinary. Even the opposition secularists were saying, "Well, okay, vote for us, and we'll change the constitution to allow hijab." What, in Turkey?
Yeah, so it's really kind of you can see it, and the young Muslims, I think it's going to be very interesting because those young Muslims, as you said, they, third generation, some now maybe even fourth, fifth generation, very well educated, very well in their articulation, confident. They see themselves as British European. In fact, some of them they've never been back to where their parents or their parents originally migrated from,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
it to an extent, perhaps there's some similarities with the story of Musa alayhi salam. Fir'aun raised Musa in his own house, but
mm,
yet Musa was the one who freed Banu Israel from the tyranny of
mm,
Fir'aun. And Fir'aun, he said to Musa, "Did I not educate you? Did I not raise you?" But Musa alayhi salam, with his principles, of course, being a prophet, he stood his ground. And so it's kind of perhaps poetically taking place in Europe today, where the tyranny of I don't want to say Europeans, because I believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, that power, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives power to different nations at different times.
yeah,
So I don't believe we can necessarily point fingers at people for what they've done when they've had power. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just as Musa was sent for the sake of bringing Islam to Fir'aun, and Islam rejected it. Fir'aun rejected Islam, but the people of Banu Israel were free from the tyranny of a lack of Islam. And
mm,
it seems that potentially, hopefully, that's what's going to take place in Europe, where people are
mm.
seeing the liberation that Islam gives them and is freeing them from the shackles of desire, the shackles of the tyranny of financial kind of oppression, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean, I was wondering how worrying all this actually is. What you're describing from the perspective of, if you're a Western person, an MP or minister or
Mm,
a leader of the education system and so on, or various lobby groups, you're really trusting that, through a lot of education and ideological
yeah,
control, shall we say, that the Muslims will turn out to be just like the Christians, really,
and it's just not working.
and it's not working. So
No,
this is a real bad news story, a worrisome development, surely,
yeah,
from that point of view, because it's just not working out as it should have done. Because I can't kind of think sometimes, and I have no inside knowledge. I just assume this is the case, that we don't need to, say in England, we don't need directly to tell Muslims to change their religion. We don't need to say, Muslims, ignore your. They haven't done that, and they won't do it directly. What they have done, though, is basically bombard them all the time through schools and the media with the contrary worldview. So you get the point. Well, you've got to adapt your Islam to the Western model. That's what's really expected, and they do it quite cleverly, I think, in England anyway. In other countries, it's more crude, like in France, but here there's an attempt to do it with a little bit of sophistication.
yeah,
Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's my perspective. But the point is, it's failed. That's what I'm trying to say. Whether it's the
yeah,
direct or indirect
yeah,
attempt to change the religion. I mean, I bet lots of young Muslims, in other words, it's very rare. I mean, but I can tell you the names of the people. I won't say them on air, who I know who call themselves, modernist or liberal Muslims. They're
yeah,
so
yeah,
rare
yeah,
that they're that remarkable. But the absolute norm is people who are solidly on the deen, who accept the son of the prophet, peace be upon him, as is,
yeah,
and are not adjusting, i.e., compromising or changing it because of the latest views from BBC or or the Conservative government or Fox News or whatever. And this is not a trivial thing. This is really
No,
amazing.
no, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's miraculous when you think about it, because you have a young generation that literally the doors of the dunya are open to them. They
Yeah.
can have whatever they want and go wherever they please, but yet they're choosing to apply Islam. There was a young primary school boy who I know personally, and he actually in primary school, he requested a place to pray dhuhr.
Mm.
He said, "I need to pray because it's a part of my religion," and the primary school is an advocate for human rights. They're a golden rights respecting school, and so he went to them on the grounds of respecting my right to practice my religion, and so they obliged, and what happened is they started to pray in jama'ah. So the young boys were leaving the playground, going and praying together, and the girls were were forming lines behind the boys and were praying behind the boys, and this is at 10 and 11 years old, and the teacher wasn't happy about this, and basically, made a comment and walked in front of him whilst he was praying, and
Wow.
he kind of, he said, "A'udhu billah, you cut off my prayer," and she said, "I've never been spoken to by a student like this in my entire career," and for me, it was quite funny because as a school, you're pushing this, children should speak out and should be opinionated, and you're ridding society of the idea of hierarchy and respect for elders, now referring to teachers by their first names, but
Mm.
it's not working in the way that it was assumed that it would work. It's actually further entrenching and being utilized by these young Muslims to kind
Yeah.
of empower themselves. It's all from Allah.
Well, no, I agree. Although what you're saying is very true of England, in France, where they do have the language of empowerment and individual rights and liberty, the same thing you've just, they also have something else, which called laicite, the idea of secularism, which is the official state ideology. Uh,
Mm.
and that is enforced quite with I would say in an authoritarian way. So what you described in that school could never, certainly at the
Yeah,
moment,
take
never
place.
happen in
Yeah,
France.
yeah.
It would be seen as illegal. It would cause apoplexy. Politicians up
Mm.
and down the country would have heart attacks if they actually thought a student was praying. I know it sounds weird to English ears, but it. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating. If anything, it is
Yeah,
it's worse than that.
but I think that's also why we should also be, as Muslims and as citizens of the UK, we
Mm,
should be grateful, to the fact that, alhamdulillah, the UK is, there are a lot of rights afforded to its citizens, and we shouldn't forget that,
mm,
when the Prophet ﷺ sent the Sahaba to East Africa, he mentioned there is a righteous king there, a just king there,
mm,
and so the Prophet ﷺ recognized the justice that they would receive. And so in the UK today, yes, there are certain institutions, perhaps individuals that don't like Islam, might be trying to prevent people from practicing, or but at the same time, generally speaking, English people are very accepting of Muslims. You know, they're embracing Islam.
mm,
The British government, affords rights, whether English, um, you know, uh, migrant. If we say to all British citizens, Muslims can come here and they are given the opportunity to kind of, work. And so you have to recognize ihsan when ihsan is given to you. And I
mm.
think it's very important because sometimes it's very easy to take a more kind of critical approach,
Yeah.
and especially when we talk about Islam and non-Muslims. But we also have to recognize that our role here is to bring Islam to everyone, including those that don't want Islam. Rahmatan lil alameen. The Prophet ﷺ, he was calling Khalid ibn al-Walid to Islam, Abu Sufyan to Islam, Hind to Islam,
Mm,
radiallahu anhum. He
mm,
didn't turn them away due to the
mm,
aggression they showed towards Islam and the Muslims when they were ready to accept Islam.
mm, mm,
And perhaps it requires a level of maturity to look at those who who have a level of animosity for Islam and the Muslims, and to be able to say to yourself, I want that person to become Muslim. I hope that that person finds Islam, because their hatred for Islam comes from a place of jahiliyyah, ignorance. And Islam came to rid mankind of its ignorance. As the Prophet ﷺ said, I'm like the person trying to prevent the moths from going into the fire.
Yes, that's
The
right.
moth is naturally attracted to the fire. And so those who take over after the Prophet ﷺ, calling people to Islam, they have to recognize these people, their animosity, their enmity, their ill feelings, it comes from ignorance. And so I have to recognize that ignorance and be mature enough to not tolerate it, but to rise above it in order to bring them what they need, which is Islam.
And of course, some of the Prophet's bitterest enemies ultimately did become his companions. So,
Yeah.
I suppose that the moral for that, for me, is not to ever ultimately give up, even to people who are now the sworn enemies of Islam. There are such people, because you never know, by God's grace and people's lives are in the hands of God, that He may turn them round and they may become staunch allies. It's one of
And
the things.
on that point, my apologies for interrupting, but on that point you mentioned earlier, the where perhaps the institutions that don't want Islam to kind of reach the masses are worried and looking at what's happening, and the
I'm
plan
sure
is not going.
they are.
Yeah, but then it's very interesting because certain individuals and maybe components of the far right are actually now starting to
Oh yeah,
show
that's right.
that they're sympathetic towards Islam. For example, someone I never thought I would hear actually praising Islam, but Alex Jones saying, I would prefer Islam to the liberal left. So it's very interesting, where society is going. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, hate who you hate in moderation, and love who you love in moderation, because the one you love today, you may end up hating him tomorrow, and the one you hate today, you may end up loving him tomorrow. And so it's that balance and recognizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control, and we're simply mediums of bringing guidance to mankind,
Yeah.
regardless who's standing in front of us.
Exactly, and I mean, you just touched briefly on that. The political thing, Islam isn't of the left or of the right, but nevertheless,
Yeah.
it does connect with aspects which are called right by convention in the West at the moment. They're not like
Yeah.
metaphysically right, they're just
Yeah,
are
exactly.
and on the left. So the right would be, in that sense, traditional roles for men and women, a rejection of most, if not all, of the LGBT agenda.
Yeah.
And on the left, it would be a concern for, I would argue, social justice, for the concern for the poor, the widow, the oppressed, and a concern for seeing right done and against oppressive rulership. These are kind of, in inverted commas, left-wing themes, although
Yeah.
they're not left in some metaphysical sense. They're just, that's how the language is used at the moment. So there is this connection to across the political spectrum. I would argue.
Yeah, 100%. And you see, so for example, there's I've seen individuals that they are inclined towards the left, and they've been attracted to Islam by, as you mentioned, the kind of like the social justice aspects of Islam. And I've seen those that perhaps would be called inclined towards the right, and that's what attracts them to Islam, the conservative nature, the clear cut, man, woman, roles, things like that. And it's very important, and sometimes it's very difficult for us to stay in the middle. It is very
Yeah,
difficult to stay in the middle sometimes.
and our politicians as well, who seem to be overwhelmingly from the left, or even those who, well, overwhelming in the left, who might endorse the social justice aspect of Islam. When it comes to these other things, just ignore it. And so,
Yeah.
we have certain leaders in Scotland, mentioning no names, who seem to completely bought the woke agenda and all that goes with it, as Muslims, and that is fairly typical. Like, we have a Lord Mayor in London who's pretty much the same, and other places, mayorships throughout the UK, and they don't. There seems to be an alliance between, is in their view, between being Muslim and the left, political left, and I rarely, if ever, see it with the right. And there may be other reasons why on the right it's not possible, maybe at the moment. But nevertheless, it's overwhelmingly left wing in terms of the political marriage of convenience between their perception of what the Muslims' interests are and the political left in the UK. And I think that is long overdue for a rehaul.
And I think it's taking place in popular culture. So you
Right.
mentioned Andrew Tate and
Mm,
I guess other individuals like him. They are coming from what would be called right now the right, and you're finding that a lot of young men and women, they are inclining towards the right due to what they're seeing in the political field, the agendas, and not it's not necessarily the political direction, but more the suppression of opinion that
mm,
goes against and
mm,
that naturally in any society, if you suppress the opinions of a young um generation, I guess, and underculture is going to develop, and they're gonna start to express their opinions in other ways. They're gonna find you know
mm,
um other groups, etc. And so it's perhaps more related to that than being left or being right.
mm. Yeah.
And I mean, those that were yesterday considered left wing are today considered right wing. Individuals
Yeah,
like
so
Pierce
some of
Morgan.
yeah, well, yes, and some feminists now find themselves very much against the trans ideology, and they're labelled as kind of reactionary. But these are the
Yeah,
standard bearers of the left wing political feminist ideology.
yeah.
Ironically,
And
mm.
and I think there's also another area that is bringing people to Islam, which is the spirituality.
Yeah,
Because the political field is stripped of any spirituality,
yeah,
but this I find that a lot of people are interested in the spiritual side of Islam.
mm,
They want to read the spiritual works of Islam, and they're looking for the more kind of metaphysical
mm,
aspects of Islam than they are the as mentioned previously, the theological or the political,
mm,
perhaps.
mm. Yeah. By theological, I meant spiritual as well. I was kind of
Okay, yeah,
encompassing that. I saw it is. I discovered Islam had many spiritual and theological similarities with Christianity, although there
okay,
were differences as well. But overwhelmingly, there are similarities. There are differences, obviously, on the Trinity and incarnation and Jesus mainly. But
yeah,
other than that, there are an awful lot of similarities which get overlooked in the polemical arguments between the two religions.
mm,
The same goes with Orthodox Judaism, very
mm,
similar to Islam in many ways, although there are real differences about, again, the person of Jesus, who they reject,
mm,
of course.
mm.
So, yeah, it's like an iceberg, under the water, there's a huge amount that we just don't see that is there, but we focus on the bit that's visible over the top. And anyway, I'm not saying all religions are the same. I'm just saying that
No,
there
of
is
course, yeah, of course,
more in common than many people might think,
yeah,
despite real differences which matter, though.
yeah,
Um, well, perhaps we can draw to a conclusion. I mean, is there anything you wanted just to say in conclusion about this? I mean, I might even ask, but is this spike in converts? Is it a blip? Is it a flash in the pan?
mm,
Um, are we going to return to business as usual in a year's time, or are we looking at something more plate tectonic, or something where something fundamental has changed on the ground, and we're
mm.
looking at a trajectory that will go solidly into the future? Do you get a sense of what might happen?
So I think that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, of course, is in control of the Ummah Islam, but from the qualities of Islam, or the history of Islam, and the direction that Islam takes, is that Allah uses the men and women of Islam to aid it, to bring it forward, etc. And so I think the future, the direction, whether or not this is a blip or it's a continual kind of
Mm,
uptake that we see, I think it might be dependent upon the role that the leaders of Islam take. When I say leaders, I mean community leaders. Those are active in the communities, masajid. If we develop the culture of bringing Islam to the masses, then I think that's what's going to happen. But if
mm,
we go back to being insular and only concerned with our own kind of issues, internal issues, then perhaps it might be a blip. And so, I really think it's important that imams, masajid, institutions of da'wah,
mm,
institutions of learning, we really do kind of try to develop that culture of bringing Islam out to the masses through action, and application in our own personal lives. The Sahaba, they had to drive their way through various regions to bring Islam to the people on the ground. And they had to face the institutions that were trying to prevent them from delivering that message to the people on the ground. Alhamdulillah, here in the UK, in Europe, in the world now generally, we don't have to drive anywhere. We don't have to force our way into people's lands, regions. We are here amongst the masses. We are here amongst the masses, and the masses we have their ears. Through our actions. There's a famous line of poetry that Al-Mutanabbi, he said, I am the one who the deaf can hear and the blind can see. And I think that's what we need to become. We need to become the community that can be seen by the blind and heard by the deaf. We stand out with with our akhlaq, and that leads people to asking, what is Islam? And that brotherhood, that unity, because people are now isolated. People are cut off. And so we have an opportunity to bring Islam to the people at a time where the people most need it.
Absolutely. Well, that's very well said. Well, thank you very much, Imam Ashraf from Lewisham Mosque, which is in South London. I'm in North London, but the same capital. Thank you very much for your time and your insights. Very interesting indeed, and it's a subject that won't go away. And I'm very interested in the future as well. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Barakallah feekum for having me.
Until next time. Goodbye.